everybody, Paul Turner here from thediscipleproject.net and paulturnerspeaks.com, and welcome back to Day 6 of our video book club, Growing With by Kara Powell and Steve Argue. And today we're going to talk about young adults, why they're dropping out of church and why this matters to both the parents and the youth pastors. And in previous episodes, I usually give a quote, and I'd like to start this episode with a quote from the book that is going to kind of set the pace for the rest of this video. And the quote is this: "Church is less a place for young people to seek to attend and more of a community with which young people participate." I can't overemphasize how important this quote is, because at least in my 30 years of youth ministry experience, I did my best to bang the drum as loudly as possible about integrating, students post-graduation, but really from the time kids were in middle school, trying to integrate kids within the structure of the church, within the service, within different ministries in the church, and trying to connect students with other adults in the church, because everything can't rise and fall on me, and everything, I don't think, rises and falls as far as spiritual growth in the sense of it all being on parents either. I think it truly is that village mentality that because, when they're young, right, the parents are the all in all. Maybe when they're young teenagers, maybe the youth pastor then plays a part in that. But as they get older, if they don't have some extended relationships, which we'd say, so well, they would form naturally, wouldn't they? Sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes we have to be very intentional about who we want our kids around, who is going to be in that church 10 years from now that our kids are going to get to know, that is going to be connected in such a way that they're showing up for something more than just a service. And that's the deal, right? Because listen, as a parent, I've gone through that phase, right, of trying to get my kids up for church and saying, come to church. But here's the deal, though. With my kids, preachers' kids, it was kind of mandatory, up until a certain point. But then I was free with them. I said, listen, if you don't want to come to my church, that's fine, but I need you to go to church somewhere. I can tell you this, though, that my kids did not have, I would not say that they had significant relationships beyond the youth ministry with other adults in the church. Now, for whatever reason, now they've participated, they've done things. I don't know if it's intentionality on my part. I don't know if it's the lack of connection that the adults had with my kids. I don't know. I still rethink that, right, as a parent. What could I have done better? And the attitude as a parent is, well, if I can just get my kid in church, God will do something. And I agree with that. I agree God can do anything he wants to do, and he can certainly do it in a service. But let me say this. I don't think God is waiting for our children to show up to church to do something. I think God is waiting on the church to step forward and reach out and, draw our kids into a greater mission. It's tough. Like I said, when you're waking up kids, you're trying to wake them up to go to service because we think the service is what's going to do the work. And I'm saying, no, I think my kids would have shown up if the mission had been greater, if there was a role for them to play, if there was a ministry that they were participating in, if they were connected in some way beyond just going to church because you have to go to church. Now, whether our church does something or doesn't do something, it really depends on what the church values, right? If the church values, preaching, service, great music, all those are great and fine. But let me tell you what, if a church does not value discipleship, intentional relationships, community, all those things, it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell to my kids to say, look, this church values X, and I want you to show up and value X as well. It doesn't work like that. It's not attractive. I mean, trying to, tell your kids to show up because the service is going to be great, that's just not with my kids, not with my kids at all. I think people in general are community driven, and I think people want to show up for a greater cause and a greater purpose than to sit through a service. My recommendation as a youth worker, especially to those of our youth workers, but even to you that are parents, is to say, look, how do I get my kid connected early? How do I find their gifts, talents, and abilities early? To find how they can contribute to the church. How can they be, not bystanders, but participants in the gospel, participants in community, participants in reaching people, participants in seeing the great need of showing up and being a believer every week into our services so that we can serve, we can meet needs, and whatever that may be, whether that's teaching them how to pray with people at the altar, serve in the nursery, whatever that may be, we just have to find their gifts, talents, and abilities early. That is partly my premise, by the way. If you have ever seen my video on the Disciple Project, that's getting kids out early. That's getting kids out of meetings and actually doing the gospel and doing those things. So I'm going to put a link up here somewhere where you can get to the video on that, but also a link down below. If you just go to thediscipleproject.net, it'll take care of itself. The video's there, all that stuff there. So just go to thediscipleproject.net. And that's my premise, is to get kids out of youth meetings early, partner with adults, and go and do ministry within your community. So if you want more info about that, please go ahead and leave me a comment down below. I would love to talk to you more about that. There was a study done by Lifeway. And Lifeway is a Christian bookstore and curriculum creating entity and all that kind of stuff. And they did a poll. I want to share with you the 5 reasons they say young adults between the ages of 23 and 30 check out of church. The 5 reasons are: I moved to college and I stopped attending church. That's 34%. Church members seem judgmental or hypocritical. That's 32%. I didn't feel connected to people in my church. That's 29%. I disagreed with the church's stance on political social issues. 25%. My work responsibilities prevented me from attending. 24%. Now listen, in all of those, can I tell you what? Now let me speak to you as youth workers real quick. Youth workers, you have very little power or control as to what your pastor preaches, what your overall vibe and feel of the church is. What are the church's hang-ups? Whatever that is. You have very little control in trying to change all of that. But the one thing you can change is number 3. I didn't feel connected to the people in my church. We as youth pastors can help facilitate that. It's the one thing that we have control over. And whether that's introducing kids to members in our church who are significant, who have significant roles, or whether that's getting kids connected in ministries and talking to ministry leaders about the importance of getting our kids involved early, whatever that may be. But that's the one thing that we have control over. We can connect students with the adults in our church who are caring, loving, who are doing ministry, and who need help doing ministry. How you do that? Well, that's going to be up to you. You know your church better than I do. But what I do know is that I believe that kids stay in church longer when the cause is bigger. They're not showing up for the service anymore. They're showing up because the cause is bigger. I believe the more that we can as youth pastors connect students to people in the church and to ministries in the church and get them going early, I think the reason they show up changes, and I think they have a greater perspective, which they then can put the service in perspective, the church service, in conjunction with their gifts, talents, and abilities, that I'm here for a greater reason. And the sermon and the worship is a part of that as my vertical relationship with God, but it's also about my horizontal relationship with other people and how I serve and how I do. So it's all kind of goes together with that. In the end, whether it's us as parents or us as youth workers, there is a point where we can do only so much, that a student has to take ownership and accountability of their own faith. I love this quote by the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:1. It says, "Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain." And it's that little key verse there, the key part of this is if you hold firmly. There has to be a responsibility on the part of the person who has received the message, who has heard the message, to hold firmly to it, to walk in it. And that's the discipleship process, right? Figuring out how to hold firmly and walk the things that we very much believe in. And so if you're a parent, can I encourage you with this? Listen, I understand. If you feel like your kids are wayward or wandering or not living as they should, can I tell you something? You're not a failure. You're not a failure. There's responsibility upon your kids to own the faith. If they have heard the message, partly why kids, I believe, fall away is the fact is that they do not hold firmly, right? They don't take it inwardly. They don't practice it. They don't find ways to do that. But that's where we come around them and help them and say, look, we're going to give you every opportunity to use your gifts, talents, and abilities to serve the Lord so that the cause is bigger than you, so that you can understand that how God has made you, how you fit in the church, it all goes together. And the message and the worship and all that is a part of the deal. It's what we do as believers. And so parents, let me encourage you. God loves you. God loves your kids. And you know what? They have to have some responsibility on their own to accept and receive and hold firmly to the message of the gospel. And we as parents and we as youth workers can always present it, represent it, encourage them, but they have to go ahead and take responsibility for that. So, but that's it for today, guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I hope you guys have enjoyed this particular episode for Growing With, and I hope you'll check out a few things. I hope you, first of all, if you don't own the book yet, there's a link down below there that you can go ahead and buy the book for yourself and maybe watch through the videos. And then you leave comments. I hope that you'll leave some comments, maybe some questions that you have about that. I hope that you go check out thediscipleproject.net and ask me questions about that, how to give up 12 meetings a year to start a movement in your kids where they can be greater connected to the church in all kinds of ways and to the community. So I hope that you'll check that out. So that's it for today, guys. Appreciate you guys hanging out, and I will catch you guys in the next video. We'll talk to you guys later.